Hey there, boys and girls. Matt here, Pickled Dragon, with another Pickled Dragon Unscripted. Flying solo. Jacoya is tied up this weekend, sadly. But I wanted to share with you guys a conversation I had with some fellow gamers. And we were kind of discussing why WotC has had such a difficult time kind of cornering the market on RPGs. Now, before I say anything, they are the big dog, but that OGL crisis hit them right where it hurts, and they had to back off. Had they been able to squash the OGL, we would be in a very different creator landscape today. And so I wanted to talk about why we as a gaming community were able to leverage our might against that and a number of other fiascos they've had. Whereas some other, like video game industry, they kind of have to wait, let that company lose a bunch of money first before they'll make any changes. And so, just a quick recap, with the OGL scandal, it was an attempt by them to literally steal other creators' IPs. They said, well, we'd be able to publish it without giving credit, because you're using our license, blah, blah, blah. It's the height of greed and narcissism. The scandals only deepened from there. They were labeling the original creators misogynists and racists with their 50-year celebration book in the preface there, if you recall, social media posts. That blasted drive-through RPG disclaimer, which we'll post here just for you guys' memory. They had a character in one of their books called Thaco the Clown, of all things. An obvious jab at old school gamers. And then it just snowballed from there. Half races are racist. Orcs are racist. Sensitivity readers and yada blah blah. And it goes on and on. And it just seemed like they weren't able to make a move without stumbling across a landmine. And so the conversation we had is, why can't WotC seem to build any goodwill? And I want to preface that by saying, I think that all of their moves were designed to try to squash competition, and to entice or even bully other gamers into pressure. I don't know if bullying is the right word, but pressure other gamers into using their current version of D&D, But rather than just make a great product and try to attract people, they said, well, if you do anything else, you're a racist. If you use these half races, you're a racist. Don't play the OSR because they're nothing but a bunch of Thaco the Clowns, right? And so I think it's important to consider that all of the folks running WotC currently are from a software background. And I've mentioned this before, where, in software business, you own the source code. And you got to think of the source code as the rules of that game, right? And no one else really has access to it. So when they attempted to squash the OGL, it was their attempt to lock down the source code for D&D. Unfortunately, they failed, So, I believe that the problem here and why they have an inability to build goodwill with the customer base is they have a fundamental lack of understanding of a tabletop gamer and where the game came from. So what is the foundations upon which the game was built upon? So, I guess the real question is what makes RPG players different from other hobbyists like video games? Why did they rally so vehemently when that OGL was challenged? Even players who didn't play D&D, they were playing other systems. I think it's important to point out that gamers know that all WotC does is provide a rule set for us to use, to play a game, to go on adventures. And Gary Gygax famously said, the secret we should never let game masters know is that they don't need any rules. Here's to you. So, individual game masters, dungeon masters, spend hundreds of hours a year creating worlds, adventures, NPCs, and then consider that's not even game time. Like my group meets once a week for 5 hours. So I might be spending 1,000 hours or more a year on Dungeons and Dragons. And that's not even considering the time I spend on Kickstarters, and that's just running my game, And I've been doing this for 40 years. I used to run 3 games a week. That is a huge, huge time investment. And I would wager that mass MMO players are the only ones in the video game world that can really claim to spend that much time, playing a game. But the difference is, they're consuming a game. Whereas when we are developing our games, we are creating worlds. We are creating content to be used and consumed by the players. And in a lot of cases, a lot of times, the players are creating content as well, whether they're, getting pictures done of their characters or writing backstories, whatever. So I think there's a fundamental difference there, And I also think it's important to point out that, the founders of the game built D&D on a culture of empowering players to create their own worlds and homebrew rules. In other words, make D&D their own. Like Gary Gygax is famously, received phone calls and from players with questions, and he would almost always say, "Hey, well, what rule did you use? And what? How did you rule on that question you have for me?" And they would say, and he'd say, "Sounds good to me." Oh. So there's no official guide or no official way I should have. There is no official. Remember, you don't need rules, and it goes beyond that, because in the 70s and 80s, we didn't have the internet or anything like that. Finding players was hard, and so if you didn't have a group of nerds at high school or junior high or whatever to put a group together, there were people that used old school Xerox machines. They would distribute newsletters, set up play-by-mail games, created conventions, and figured out a way to make a few bucks along the way, And these early gamers were responsible for finding players, growing the hobby, and building a community from scratch, And for nearly 40 years, up until 5e came out, and Stranger Things made it kind of cool, D&D was suddenly cool, gamers literally bled for the hobby, Many of the gamers found sanctuary in D&D. They had difficult social lives. They a lot of times didn't have many friends. They were the geeks and the nerds. They weren't cool, getting sand kicked in their face. And playing D&D may have added one more reason to scream nerd at them, but we didn't care. At that point, who cares? Because with or without it, it didn't matter. What was important was that it allowed them to connect to a friend group. And, they found friendship and belonging in those groups. So I don't think you can understate that enough. And taken as a whole, D&D has a special significance. It's personal to the gamers, especially the ones that played in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It's a very personal thing. Imagine investing that much time, that much effort. And honestly, WotC even that culture I said of making D&D your own was actually encouraged by WotC at the beginning, right? When they bought TSR, they just a few years later launched the OGL. They said, "Hey, have at it. We're going to have all these creators from across the landscape building content for the game we love. Everyone make it your own." So even they affirmed that idea early on. But eventually we have come to Hasbro. They want to make D&D a $1 billion enterprise. They said, we don't want to mess with any IP that's not $1 billion. That's well established. And so when they announced that, D&D is under monetized, it's only making $100 and something million a year. Woo! It was a severing from the practices of the past, that fostering of goodwill with gamers. It was done, and the OGL scandal was just absolutely a stake in the heart to every gamer. The caretakers of the D&D, the thing that we take very personally, that we love, those caretakers officially gave zero shits about the players, the creators. We were at that point, we were just walking dollar signs. We just want to like pour as much money into what they think, that we just want to give them the money because they are D&D. They don't need to create anything good. It's just, VTT microtransaction time, right? Well, of course that, excuse me. Of course that backlash was immediate and painful. The boycotts of D&D Beyond made an instant impact as the players just hemorrhaged from the platform. Sales of Pathfinder, Castles of Crusade, Shadow Dark just exploded. It's a real renaissance. Now, don't get me wrong, WotC is still the big dog, right? But we have spoken, if you will. We have given all of these other creators an infusion of players that I don't think they're going to get back. I know so many people who are just like, you know what, I don't like what I see with their business practices. Some people don't like what they see with the 6E material, whatever, but they're not going back. Now, we've figured out that WotC needs about 250,000 people to get on their VTT, pay the monthly subscription, do the microtransactions, and if they don't, and they need that to get to that $1 billion mark. Professor Dungeon Master said that he thinks that D&D at best is a $300 million bet. It's possible. But $1 billion, if it doesn't reach the $1 billion, will Hasbro shelve D&D like they did so many other IPs? Well, I don't know, but role-playing games by their very nature are fortified against any effort to try to nail them down and control who participates in the creation of content. The VTT, I think, is a very powerful way to do that if you get everyone to join, because it won't be flexible. You won't be able to do a whole bunch of homebrew stuff, particularly if they want to use AI in it. You'll be stuck with whatever content they give you. But I don't think, I think that WotC doesn't understand what Gary Gygax knew, and that was, we don't need their rules. There are so many other games, so many other rule sets. Or we could simply make our own, I really don't know what to expect from the VTT. I'd like to know what you guys think. I don't know. There's no way I think they get to the $1 billion mark. They will have to they probably won't only have to get to the point where they get 250,000 people on D&D Beyond, which I'm sure they have, but to actually get to the point where they are have that many players on the VTT and doing microtransactions and so forth, they would have to poach players from other VTTs. I don't know if that'll happen. I hope not. Not because I hate WotC or anything. It's just, I don't know anybody who likes to regularly play online. The people I do know don't pay a monthly subscription. They just do it on Discord. And if they could play in person, they would. And obviously, the latest wave of layoffs is not a good sign. 100 more Hasbro employees, and 4 WotC employees in that as well. So I'd definitely take a second and go check out Professor Dungeon Master's analysis of that, because he talks about the financial implications of it all. And I really, I think it would be good for you guys to take a look. But in any case, have a, let me know what you think. Do you think that I'm right? Are role-playing games more fortified against, WotC's, crushing fist, their Big B's crushing fist? Or are they... do you think that they'll be successful with their VTT? Are they going to get to that $1 billion mark? I don't think so, but let me know what you think. Comment, like, subscribe, all that. And come on back and have another round on us.